Let's turn to James chapter 5, looking tonight at verse 9. Where James exhorts us, grudge not one against another. A little bit of a difficult sentence to understand. The Greek word synadzo, that is translated grudge, if you will look at it in different versions of the Bible, NIV or some of the other versions, you will find that in some places it says don't grumble against another. Other places it says don't murmur against another. And again, it says don't complain against another. So, using the word grudge, basically he is saying don't hold a grudge against someone. Or he is saying don't grumble against another person, or don't complain against another person, or don't murmur against another person. You've probably all met people who are holding grudges. Kay and I were over in Europe, in Austria, and we met a man one evening there, and 25 years ago, that was when we were there, that was probably 10 years ago, his wife had left him and had taken up with an evangelist or something. This fellow was so bitter. The whole evening, 3 hours, all he could do is tell us how horrible that wife was 25 years ago to have left him. I mean, he was so obsessed by it, that's all he could talk about. His wife leaving him. And actually, by the time the evening was over, I sort of understood why she would have left him. I was glad to leave him myself. I can't imagine holding a grudge for 25 years. But you could tell that it was damaging him. Now, I suppose his wife is happy and going on living. It doesn't really bother her, I'm sure, that he is so upset over this. She probably doesn't even know. I'm sure that she hasn't been in contact with him over this period of time. But it is eating him up. It is destroying him. And this so often is the case. If I am, holding a grudge against someone for something they did to me, and I just, am being eaten up by it, it doesn't really bother the person, but it definitely affects me. And it was almost destroying this man. One of the great sins in the nation of Israel was their murmuring. And if you want to translate this, don't murmur against another. You surely have some classic examples to see the damage that murmuring can do. And you can see the attitude that God has towards those who do murmur. When the children of Israel had left Egypt, they had come into the wilderness area. They came to the pool of Marah, but they couldn't drink of the waters because they were bitter. And it said the people murmured against Moses. And they said, "What shall we drink?" In the next chapter, chapter 16 of Exodus, we read, the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And they said unto them, "Would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and we ate bread to the full. For you've brought us into this wilderness to kill us with hunger." Murmuring against Moses. Now, of course, it was while they were in Egypt that they were murmuring and complaining because of the hard life. They were bond slaves, and it was not a miserable life, and the people were crying unto the Lord. And so the Lord sent Moses to lead them out of that bondage into a glorious land, and that they might be blessed of God and know the blessings of God. But now on the way, they start almost immediately murmuring. "Would to God we had died in Egypt, and you brought us out here to kill us in this wilderness," and murmuring against Moses. In the 7th verse of chapter 16, Moses said to the people that the Lord heard their murmurings against him. "Just who are we that you should murmur against us?" In other words, you were murmuring against us, but the Lord heard it. And, just who are we that you should murmur against us? Then we get into Numbers chapter 14. And Moses tells us that when the 10 spies came back from spying out the land with a discouraging report, they said, "The people are, all of them, like giants. We were like grasshoppers in their sight. Their cities have walls that reach up to heaven." Now, this obviously is an exaggeration, but it put fear in the heart of the people. God had promised that he was going to give them this land, that he would go before them, that he would drive out the enemy from before them. But these reports just created fear in their hearts. And we read that the congregation lifted up their voice and they cried and they wept all night. And they murmured against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, "Would to God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would to God that we had died in the wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to this land that we might fall by the sword, that our wives and our children would be a prey? It would be better for us to return to Egypt." God is wanting to do something good for them. And yet they are murmuring against the Lord, and they're murmuring against the Lord's appointed leadership, Moses and Aaron. There in the 26th verse of chapter 14 of Numbers, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron about the judgment that he was going to bring upon the people because of their murmuring. He said, "How long shall I put up with this evil generation which murmur against me? I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel, which they murmur against me. Say unto them, As truly as I live, saith the Lord, as you have said, so will I do. Your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness. And all that were numbered of you, according to the whole number, from 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me, shall not come into the land, with the exception of Joshua and Caleb." So the two spies that brought back an encouraging report and tried to say to the people, let's go in and take it. They said, "Oh, but they're giants." They said, "Oh, they're bread for us." Oh, the cities have walls that reach into heaven. Oh, they're nothing. And because they sought to encourage the people to go on into this land that God had promised to them, the people started talking about stoning Joshua and Caleb because they were trying to encourage them to just trust the Lord and go into the land that God had promised. But they were kept from that land. They had to pay a price for their murmuring against the Lord. And know this, your murmuring against the Lord can hinder you from the blessings that God is wanting to bestow upon you. And if you want to just murmur against the Lord, it will stop the blessings of God upon your life. And so murmuring it's a negative thing, but it's a bad thing also because it just chokes off God's blessings. There was a man by the name of Korah, and he started to murmur against Moses and Aaron, but especially against Moses, because Moses had set his brother Aaron as the high priest according as God had instructed him. But Korah got some guys together. They started talking. Korah said, you know, we are Levites, and we have every right in the world to go in and offer the sacrifices as much as does Aaron and his family. Moses is just setting up his own brother, nepotism. And they started to complain against Moses because he had appointed Aaron as the high priest, again, according as God had instructed him. But Korah raised up a group, and they were rebelling against the leadership of Moses. They said it's not fair, it's not right what he's doing and all, and they got this thing going. And it's amazing how, you know, someone with a negative attitude can spread that negativism around in a group. And so here's Korah saying, yeah, you know, that Moses, and they say, yeah, that's right, he did, you know, and this whole thing got going. It was like a cancer eating away, as murmuring is like a cancer. It eats away. So they came down to Moses. They said, Moses, yeah, what's up, fellas? You've taken too much on yourself, setting up your brother Aaron as the high priest. We have every right to offer the incense and all, as does, you know, your family. So Moses said, well, fellas, why don't we let the Lord decide this? And so he said, you guys come down here tomorrow, bring your little brass incense burners, put the incense in them, put the coals of fire in the incense. Come on down. We'll let the Lord decide the issue. So the next morning, here came 250 fellows with their little brass censers and their incense. And so Korah didn't show up, nor the other two ringleaders that were with Korah, Dathan and Abiram. And Moses said, you know, Korah started this thing, tell him to get over here. And so they went and said, you know, Moses said for you to come on. He said, I don't have to obey Moses. You know, who's Moses? So Moses went out and he said, well, If God is in this thing, then let God do something new. Now, if these guys just live and die a natural death, we know that, I'm wrong. But if God does something different, if the earth will open up and swallow Korah and Abiram and Dathan, then we'll know that God is in it. And the earth opened up, and Korah, standing there in his tent with his family, and Nathan and Abiram, opened up, and they went on in, and the earth closed up again. And fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 rebels with their little brass incense burners. And the people murmured against Moses, and they said, "You've killed the people of God." I mean, I have a hard time. But I've discovered something. When people get in a murmuring or a complaining or a critical mood, it pretty much destroys them. I have found that once you get in that mode, it's awfully hard to get out of it. Once you start criticizing, you develop a critical attitude. It is almost impossible to stop. Several years ago, we had a fellow who had a glorious conversion. He started coming to Calvary, and he was just so excited with the things of the Lord. He was an attorney, very successful. And one day I received a letter from him, and it was complaining about something that was happening here at Calvary that he didn't agree with. And so he went on, as an attorney would do, and gave all the points why he didn't agree. I was very disappointed when I received that letter, because I know what a critical spirit can do and does do to a person. Now, his letter was based upon wrong facts. Someone had told him something was happening that wasn't happening, but yet he had to voice his opinion, not really knowing all of the facts. So I wrote him back and told him what the facts were and corrected him. And it wasn't long, though, before I got another letter from him. Now it was something different. And then another letter, and then another letter. And I realized that this fellow is on his way out. When you can find fault with everything, or always looking to find what's wrong, because they're not marching to your beat, because they're not doing what you feel they ought to be doing. And the murmuring begins, as it did with the children of Israel. They couldn't get out of that mode. Once they got in it, they perished in it. They perished in the wilderness because of it. That's why James is exhorting us, don't murmur. Don't complain. Don't grumble. And I think the word grumble is probably the one that most of the translations use, because it's something, and of course, grudge, people do carry grudges, and the problem with the grudge, they bite, and they're an evil beast. But this fellow ultimately moved away. I was receiving letters from him for quite a while. He was grumbling about the church that he had gone to in another state, and ultimately, he just sort of faded out of the picture, faded out of his walk with the Lord, and it's just one of those dangerous things that people get caught up with, and that's why James is exhorting us to be careful of this kind of murmuring or grumbling, because it is a contagious, deadly disease. It doesn't just affect you, it soon begins to affect others around you. You begin to infect others with this negative, critical attitude. And it's amazing how Satan can use that to just tear down a work of God. They're murmuring against the leadership of Moses, who was being directed by God, and the purpose was to bring them into the promised land. But yet, their murmuring cost them the blessings. In the book of Deuteronomy, as Moses is rehearsing for them now their experiences in the wilderness, he said to them, "You rebelled against the commandment of the Lord your God. You murmured in your tents, and you said, 'Because the Lord hates us, he brought us out of the land of Egypt to destroy us.'" Now you see, that wasn't true at all. It was just the opposite of the truth. But when you start getting in this mode, truth doesn't matter. You begin to make assumptions. You begin to go on rumors. David, when he was writing in the Psalms about the children of Israel, Psalm 106:24, he said, "They despised the pleasant land. They believed not God's word, but they murmured in their tents, and they hearkened not to the voice of the Lord." Paul, when he wrote to the Corinthians, in 1 Corinthians 10:10, said, "Neither murmur ye, as some of them also murmured and were destroyed by the destroyer." Murmuring can destroy you. It can do a lot of damage to others because it is contagious, and they will pick up on your murmuring, and soon they will become murmurers. And soon, as with the children of Israel, the whole congregation were murmuring against the Lord, and they lost and left the blessings because of murmuring. The reason why James tells us that we're not to hold a grudge or we're not to grumble or murmur is the fact that it is against God's will. It is a sin. You are doing something that God says you're not to do. And thus, you are in danger of being condemned. So as James said, don't hold a grudge one against another, or don't grumble one against another, or don't murmur one against another, brethren, lest you be condemned. I have found that rumors are very vicious things. And it's amazing how worked up people can get over rumors. and they are upset because they have heard some rumor, and they immediately go out and they stir up others, and they get a group around them, and they're all upset, and all because they've heard this rumor. And so often there is no fact in the rumor at all. It's nothing more than just a rumor. And they didn't seek to find out the truth, nor did they seek the Lord as to, if it were true, what they should be doing about it. Rumors are vicious. And so many people have been destroyed because rumors were spread concerning them. Because people hearing the rumors went about to assassinate their character. Let me just say this now. To my knowledge, I don't know of any rumors against me. I mean, I'm not trying to defend myself on, I was talking Sunday morning about, my time is limited. I realized that, and people all said, "Oh, are you dying?" No, I'm not dying. I'm in good shape. So I'm not trying to, I'm just talking generally about the issues of grumbling or murmuring or holding grudges, and because James is here. And I'm glad that I go straight through, because you can't say, "Well, he aimed at me tonight, if the shoe fits, wear it, but I'm not aiming at anybody. But so often, when a person has done so much damage because of repeating rumors, and like Korah, getting a group stirred up, say, "Oh, do you know what Moses is doing? Look what Moses is doing, setting up his son, that son, or his brother-in-law." And he's saying, not right, not right. And when the truth comes out, then they are condemned. Jesus said, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." Back in the beginning of this book of James, in chapter 1:19, James said, "Wherefore, my beloved brothers, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath." When you hear something, unless it's really been confirmed and it is absolutely true, best not to pass it on. Because if it's a lie, then you are passing on a lie. And it can be so damaging and so destructive. So many people can be hurt. Solomon wrote something I think is extremely wise. Well, he wrote a lot of things that were wise, but this is especially wise, if that is such a thing. Wise is wise, I guess. He said, "But he that answers a matter before he hears it, that is, hears all of it, it is a folly and a shame to him." You remember when David had sinned with Bathsheba, and his friend Nathan the prophet came to him and told him the story of this wealthy man who had plenty of flocks and so forth, who had a neighbor who was very poor, had only one little ewe lamb that was like a pet. It slept with him at night, and it was just, it was all he had. And how that when this rich man with all of his flocks had friends come for dinner, he ordered his servants to, by force, go take the one little ewe lamb from his neighbor and slay it so he could make a feast for his guest. David didn't hear the full story. He judged before hearing the full story. David said, "That man shall surely be put to death." Then he heard the full story. "David, you're the man." You know, if a man speaks before he hears the whole matter, it can become folly and shame to him. James warns us that the true judge is at the door. Now, you see, you've put yourself in the place of a judge. When you start murmuring and complaining, you put yourself in the place of a judge, and you're judging another man. And putting yourself in the place of a judge is dangerous, because you are setting the measure that the Lord will use when he judges you. So, as Jesus warned, "Judge not, lest you be judged. For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. And with what measure you mete it out, that will be the same measure that will be used in meting it to you again." So in reality, you're creating the standards by which you are going to be judged. If you are harsh in your judgment, then you will be judged harshly. If you are merciful in your judgment, then you will be judged mercifully. Blessed are the merciful, Jesus said, for they shall obtain mercy. But even that is interesting, because if you are merciful in judgment, if you seek to restore a man who is down, then there are